I packed up everything I owned, a lifetime of possessions, and disappeared without a trace after my son slapped me across the face in front of 300 wedding guests. My own family sided with him. 8 years later, I re-entered his world as the principal investor for an exclusive event for millionaires, and found a security guard staring directly at me. "Excuse me, ma'am, but you look awfully familiar," he began to say. The instant our eyes locked, I knew that my past and my present were about to collide in the most catastrophic way imaginable. My name is Naomi Thacker. I am 63 years old, and this is the story of how one single night demolished everything I had painstakingly constructed over the past 35 years, and how my silence became my most powerful form of revenge. But in order to fully understand why I vanished completely, you first need to know the kind of woman I was before I became a ghost. You need to meet the woman who willingly sacrificed absolutely everything for a son who ultimately disrespected her love. And you desperately need to know the secret that I had guarded for decades. The very secret that would dramatically alter everything on that mortifying night. It all began 35 years ago. The first time I ever held Elias in my arms. His father abandoned us both when Elias was only 2 years old, leaving me all alone with a tiny baby and without even a single penny to my name. At least that's what everyone else assumed. They were completely unaware that 6 short months after he walked out on us, my own dear mother passed away unexpectedly, and left me an inheritance of nearly $2 million in properties and various bank accounts that no one even knew existed. While all of my neighbors watched me leave the apartment every single morning before the crack of dawn to go clean other people's houses, while my hands became rough and calloused from relentlessly ironing clothes that weren't even mine, while I diligently served coffee at a dreadful diner, barely earning a few dollars in tips, I secretly possessed enough money to live like royalty for the rest of my entire life. But I purposely chose not to touch it. I deliberately chose for my son to grow up actually seeing the beads of sweat on my forehead, the incredibly dark circles that formed under my weary eyes, and the genuine sacrifice of a hard-working single mother. I sincerely thought that was precisely how he would learn valuable lessons. I honestly believed he would never look down on or despise anyone based on their financial standing. I was convinced that hard work would indelibly engrave in his impressionable soul the critical difference between simply having and truly being. How completely foolish I was. Elias blossomed into a remarkably good kid. He diligently studied, always helped me around our small apartment, and faithfully hugged me every single night, sincerely thanking me for absolutely everything. I even managed to obtain scholarships for him by purposely presenting myself as a low-income, single mother who was struggling. I proudly watched him graduate with top honors in business administration. I then happily watched him secure his very first job at a mid-sized logistics firm. Every single one of his achievements was my own private and silent victory. Each genuine smile of his was worth significantly more than the $2 million I secretly kept hidden away. "I'm going to buy you a really big house one day, Mom," he would always say while hugging me tightly. "You will never have to clean another floor ever again. I promise you that." I smiled sweetly, carefully guarding my life-altering secret. I already secretly owned 3 separate properties spread across 3 different states. Properties that he would never even know existed. But it didn't really matter to me. What truly mattered was his genuine heart, his deep sense of gratitude, and his unconditional love. Or at least that's what I sincerely believed. Everything began to completely fall apart the precise moment Tiffany entered his life. She came in like an elegant and destructive hurricane. Perfectly straight hair that resembled expensive silk, flawlessly manicured pearly nails, and designer clothes that quietly but confidently screamed money. She hailed from an old money, high society family, the kind whose prestigious last names automatically opened every door imaginable. Her father personally managed multi-million-dollar investments. Her mother, Genevieve, organized exclusive charity galas where the entrance fee alone was a staggering $4,000 per person. The very first time that Elias introduced her to me, I purposely wore my best outfit, a modest, basic-colored suit that I had carefully purchased at a second-hand boutique, clean and meticulously ironed to perfection. Tiffany arrived in an ivory dress that most likely cost more than my 6-month salary. Or at least, that's what she clearly thought. "Hello, Mrs. Thacker," she said somewhat dismissively, barely extending her fingertips as if my obvious poverty was somehow extremely contagious. "Elias has told me so much about you." Her pretentious smile did not even remotely reach her cold, calculating eyes. Her eyes carefully measured me, quickly weighed me, and promptly dismissed me in mere seconds. I firmly shook her outstretched hand, staring her directly in her judgmental eyes. "It's so great to finally meet you, Tiffany. I really hope you take very good care of my son." She let out a brief and crystal-clear laugh. "Oh, don't worry about a thing. In my family, we absolutely know how to properly take care of what's ours." "What's ours?" As if Elias was merely an acquisition or possession. As if I was simply a bothersome nuisance from his past that just had to be reluctantly tolerated. I definitely should have seen all of the glaring red flags waving incessantly right in front of my very own face. I should have immediately protected my precious son from that incredibly dangerous woman. But I was honestly just so genuinely happy to see him in love that I purposely ignored my gut instinct. The following months brought about a genuinely painful and disheartening transformation. Elias began to change right before my very eyes. He frequently attended private clubs, enjoyed expensive dinners at fancy restaurants where the cheapest dish cost upwards of $200, and partied in lavish mansions with sprawling gardens illuminated by countless lights that eerily resembled sparkling crystal fireflies. Every single time that I called him on the phone, he was invariably too busy to talk. Every time that I actually visited him, he was conveniently just leaving for some important social engagement. And whenever I finally did manage to see him in person, there was an obvious change in his gaze and a noticeable sense of discomfort, a deep-seated shame that he didn't dare utter aloud, but which I could still clearly read perfectly. He was genuinely ashamed of me, of my incredibly simple clothes, of my visibly worn working hands, and of my small modest apartment located in a humble neighborhood where people commonly hung their freshly laundered clothes out to dry on their balconies. One day he casually informed me that he and Tiffany were officially getting married. He hugged me briefly, but even that simple hug felt significantly different. Shorter, and noticeably less warm than it had been before. "You're absolutely going to be in the front row, Mom. It's your day too." A blatant lie. It definitely wasn't my day in any way, shape, or form. It really wasn't even my son anymore either. The wedding was carefully planned over the course of 6 long months. Genevieve and Tiffany meticulously controlled every single detail, like seasoned generals carefully preparing for a crucial upcoming battle. I wasn't even invited to a single solitary meeting. Whenever I asked about it, Elias vaguely told me that everything was completely under control, and that I only needed to simply show up on the specified day. I reluctantly obeyed his wishes because I still desperately trusted him. I carefully purchased a beautiful cream-colored dress at a modest boutique. Nothing too flashy or ostentatious, just something dignified for the groom's beloved mother to wear proudly. I kept it hanging safely in my closet for weeks, meticulously ironing it regularly and lovingly imagining that undeniably special moment. 3 short weeks before the highly anticipated wedding, Genevieve called me directly on the phone. Her voice dripped with a subtle kind of poison. "Honey, Naomi dear, I unfortunately need to discuss a rather delicate matter with you." "Go right ahead, Genevieve. I'm right here and happy to help with absolutely anything that you need." You see, the wedding is going to be incredibly exclusive. 300 specially selected guests from a very particular social level, incredibly important people, you know. Do you fully understand what I mean? It definitely wasn't a question. It was actually a thinly veiled warning. Yes, I completely understand. Elias told me it would be a very big celebration. There was then a rather awkward and uncomfortable silence. Then, her voice suddenly turned noticeably colder than before. "What I'm really trying to politely say, Naomi, is that perhaps it would simply be better for everyone involved if you tried to keep a very low profile during the entire event. You know, people in our exclusive social circle can be incredibly observant, after all." I swallowed hard, trying to control my rising anger. Keep a low profile? Well, perhaps you could simply sit way in the back during the actual ceremony, and then at the reception afterwards, there's a perfectly located table discreetly next to the kitchen that would be absolutely perfect for you, far away from all of the main guests. It would definitely be much less pressure for you. You completely understand, right? I understood perfectly well. They were consciously hiding me. They were shamelessly turning me into the family embarrassment that desperately needed to be discreetly concealed away in the shadows. I will be wherever my son truly needs me to be, I firmly replied with a strong, unwavering voice, and then I promptly hung up the phone. I didn't sleep a wink that entire night. For the first time in the past 35 years, I doubted absolutely everything. I seriously doubted my unwavering sacrifice. I doubted my most important decisions. I deeply doubted the genuine love that I thought I had successfully planted deep in my own son's heart. But I still honestly never even imagined what was tragically still to come. The night immediately before the official wedding, I couldn't fall asleep at all. I just sat alone in my small humble apartment sadly staring at that beautiful cream-colored dress hanging so innocently on the closet door. And for the very first time in many decades, I genuinely felt that absolutely everything I had done was sadly all in vain. 35 long years of tirelessly cleaning, relentlessly ironing, relentlessly sweating, and constantly smiling through sheer exhaustion. And all for what, exactly? Just so that my own son would willingly allow me to be conveniently hidden away like some kind of old dirty rag. I briefly thought about flat-out canceling, and seriously considered simply not going at all. But a foolish part of me, that naive part that stubbornly still believed in genuine miracles, sincerely thought that maybe Elias would react positively, and that maybe seeing me actually there would gently remind him of precisely who lovingly raised him, and precisely who willingly sacrificed absolutely everything for his ultimate happiness and success. How utterly naive I was until the very last devastating moment. The actual morning of the wedding, I woke up at exactly 5 a.m. I carefully bathed and then meticulously styled my hair into a simple, yet undeniably elegant bun. I lightly applied some subtle makeup, just a slight touch of color on my lips and cheeks. I purposely wanted to look nice without ever seeming like I was somehow competing with anyone else. I put on the carefully chosen cream-colored dress, slipped on some modest, low-heeled, taupe-colored shoes that I had lovingly polished until they shone, and then placed around my neck a delicate pearl necklace that had previously belonged to my late mother, the very same real pearls that were actually worth a staggering $10,000, but which everyone would undoubtedly assume were just cheap, fake costume jewelry. I stared intently at my own reflection in the mirror and saw a dignified, proud woman, a woman who had tirelessly worked hard her entire life, and a woman who deserved genuine respect. I then hailed a cab to the designated ceremony location. It was a sprawling private estate garden located just outside of the main city, one of those exclusive places that are only ever rented out for extremely high society events. The impressive entrance was lavishly decorated with huge arches of both white and champagne-colored flowers. There was also an entire army of formally dressed staff all wearing black, meticulously arranging chairs, diligently testing microphones, and carefully placing centerpieces that probably cost significantly more than my entire monthly rent. The very moment that I arrived, a bubbly wedding coordinator with a tablet in hand immediately intercepted me. She wore a professional pearl gray pantsuit and a permanent frozen smile. "You must be the groom's mother," she said somewhat blandly, while quickly checking her electronic list. "Naomi, correct?" "Yes, that's me." "Perfect. Please come with me. I'll quickly show you to your designated spot." She then proceeded to lead me down a side path away from the grand main entrance where all of the other invited guests were currently starting to arrive in a long line of luxury cars. We briskly passed many lavish tables lavishly decorated with fine ivory linens and spectacular floral arrangements. We also quickly walked right past the obvious VIP seating area, which had exquisite gold chairs with soft velvet cushions, and then kept on walking until we finally reached a secluded area located near the busy kitchen. There was a shockingly small table that was almost completely hidden behind some purely decorative plants. It only had two flimsy folding chairs, a cheap, plain white tablecloth, no flowers, and absolutely no candles whatsoever. "You'll be very comfortable here, ma'am," the wedding coordinator said somewhat dismissively, pointedly avoiding making direct eye contact with me. "Less noise and definitely fewer people. We sincerely thought that you would probably prefer something much quieter." I just stood there silently staring at that forgotten table and abruptly felt something undeniably break deep inside of me. But I still said absolutely nothing out loud. I merely nodded slowly, meekly sat down, and quietly waited. The invited guests then began to gradually arrive. Women in expensive designer dresses, jewelry sparkling brightly in the warm sunlight, and wearing elegant hats. The men were mostly dressed in impeccably tailored suits that easily cost upwards of $4,000 each, along with flashy Swiss watches strapped firmly on their wrists, and stylish Italian leather shoes. They all loudly laughed, warmly hugged, and insincerely greeted each other with those fake air kisses that rich people commonly give without ever actually physically touching. From my distinctly hidden table, I silently watched everything unfold. No one greeted me warmly. No one even remotely looked at me in my general direction. I was painfully invisible, and simply reduced to a ghost at my very own son's much-anticipated wedding. The official ceremony began with a beautiful live violin performance. Tiffany then suddenly appeared like a genuine vision in radiant white. Her impressive dress had a long train that was easily about 10 feet long, and it was absolutely covered in glittering crystals that brilliantly captured every single ray of available light. She gracefully walked arm in arm with her stern-looking father, a robust man with perfectly gray hair and a very serious professional expression on his face. Genevieve, her clearly emotional mother, cried delicately into a small silk handkerchief while seated proudly in the very front row under a stylish champagne-colored parasol. And then I finally saw Elias, my devoted son, my precious baby, standing stoically at the flower-covered altar in an impeccable black tuxedo, his stylish hair perfectly styled, and a nervous smile plastered across his seemingly handsome face. He now looked so incredibly handsome, and so drastically different from the little boy who used to hug me so tightly after suffering from terrible childhood nightmares. I diligently searched for his eager gaze. I desperately wanted him to finally see me sitting there. I yearned for that undeniably special moment of intimate connection, that subtle acknowledgement that I was officially there, and that all of this incredible fanfare was made possible solely because of my endless sacrifices. But Elias never even turned towards the general direction of where I was quietly sitting. His eyes stubbornly remained completely fixed on Tiffany as she gracefully walked towards him, as if I simply didn't exist, as if I had genuinely never existed at all. The actual ceremony was absolutely perfect. Impassioned vows beautifully written by some hired poet, shimmering white gold rings with genuine diamonds, and a cinematic kiss while all of the invited guests loudly applauded the happy couple. Everything was undeniably beautiful and extravagant, but everything was also sadly fake. After the touching ceremony, everyone moved over to the much larger reception area. There was a huge tent that was elaborately decorated like a stunning fairy tale palace. Countless crystal chandeliers elegantly hung from the extremely high ceiling. All of the tables were meticulously covered with soft ivory linens and fine porcelain dinnerware. Each place setting then had at least 3 different glasses, and 3 distinct pieces of pristine silverware carefully placed on each respective side of every single plate. In the direct center of each table was a massive tower of intricately arranged white and peach-colored flowers that reached nearly 3 entire feet high. I quietly sat all alone at my obviously hidden table. A young and slightly nervous waiter cautiously approached me and simply served me a glass of water. Not fine wine and definitely not champagne, just plain ordinary water in a simple unassuming glass. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "Could I possibly have a glass of wine, please?" He then looked nervously towards the busy kitchen. Please let me check with my supervisor first, ma'am." He sadly never actually returned. The extravagant party then formally began with a series of carefully prepared speeches. Tiffany's proud father spoke at length about the incredibly bright and promising future of the newly married couple. Genevieve inevitably cried again as she emotionally spoke about how her beloved Tiffany had finally found her perfect match. Elias's childhood friends told funny and light-hearted anecdotes from college, from fun group trips, and from countless other memorable moments that I never even knew about, because they had sadly all occurred in that exclusive world that I never really belonged to. No one mentioned my clearly important name. No one spoke fondly of the loving mother who bravely raised Elias all alone. And no one ever thanked me for my long 35 years of unwavering sacrifice. I was merely forgotten furniture sadly stuck away in a distant corner. Dinner was then formally served. A delicious shrimp appetizer with tangy mango salsa. A savory filet main course with a flavorful herb crust and truffled mashed potatoes. And an incredibly decadent chocolate mousse dessert with delicate edible gold flakes. While the many guests happily ate and laughed, I was silently brought a very simple dish of plain chicken and rice, as if I were simply part of the catering staff, and as if I simply didn't deserve the same high-quality food as absolutely everyone else. I quietly ate in complete silence, every single bite tasting overwhelmingly bitter in my dry throat. Then the first official dance formally began. Elias and Tiffany gracefully opened the dance floor with a perfectly practiced waltz. They moved with effortless elegance, and were undeniably synchronized and perfect in absolutely every way. All of the other guests then eagerly surrounded them, loudly applauding with genuine enthusiasm. The bright lights then gradually dimmed, and everything seemed almost magical to witness. After the long waltz, Tiffany then politely danced with her proud father. Elias was traditionally supposed to dance next with his beloved mother. That was simply the long-standing tradition. But many long minutes sadly passed and no one ever actually came to get me. Elias was now seen dancing with Genevieve, then with Tiffany's stern grandmother, and then with her seemingly endless collection of wealthy aunts, but still definitely not with me. I remained seated sadly at my discreetly hidden table, quietly watching my precious son dance with all of the undeniably important women in his brand new and exciting life, while I sadly remained painfully invisible behind the strategically placed decorative plants. I then finally decided to simply get up. I absolutely wasn't going to stay sadly hidden away for even one more single minute. I bravely walked directly towards the crowded dance floor, purposely pushing my way respectfully through the numerous surrounding wedding guests. Some looked at me curiously, while others looked at me with blatant disdain. But I resolutely kept walking determinedly until I finally reached Elias. He was currently chatting cheerfully with a small group of close friends, a half-empty glass of expensive champagne held casually in his hand, while also laughing loudly at some private joke that I didn't even get the chance to hear. "Elias," I called out softly. He immediately turned around. His smiling face immediately changed drastically. The genuine smile then quickly vanished, and his cold eyes instantly hardened. "Mom, what on earth are you even doing here?" "Here?" As if I were merely a clumsy intruder, and as if I somehow didn't have the inherent right to even be physically present at my very own son's wedding. "I simply thought that maybe we could possibly dance," I said quietly, while genuinely trying to smile warmly. It's honestly a long-standing tradition for the groom to always dance with his beloved mother. Elias's friends then fell completely silent. I could definitely feel their judgmental eyes closely evaluating me, openly measuring my obviously simple dress, my undeniably modest shoes, and my ordinary hair which sadly lacked the obviously expensive touch of a professional stylist. One of the snide women, who was wearing a flashy champagne-colored sequin dress, whispered something quietly to her smug partner, and they both then laughed rather discreetly. Elias finally looked directly at me as if I had just brazenly asked him to do the utterly impossible, as if I had somehow asked him to suddenly give up absolutely everything that he had currently worked so hard to obtain. "Mom, now simply isn't really a good time for this. I'm in the middle of talking to my friends right now." "Just one quick dance," I stubbornly insisted, while also sadly feeling my voice slightly cracking with emotion. "A short dance at the very least. It's your own wedding, my precious son. It's our possible last chance to ever share something truly special and meaningful together." He tightly clenched his strong jaw. One of his close friends awkwardly coughed and quietly walked away with his partner. The rest of his close friends then gradually began to awkwardly disperse too, as if my mere unexpected presence was somehow like a terrible bad smell, blatantly forcing them all to quickly seek a breath of much-needed fresh air. "We can definitely talk more about this later," Elias finally said reluctantly. "But right now, I sincerely need to go attend to all of the other undeniably important guests. Just go back to your assigned table, please. Just go back to your assigned table." As if I were somehow a disobedient child, and as if I simply didn't have the inherent right to proudly stand freely in the very same physical space as him. Something undeniably broke inside of me at that exact moment. But it wasn't merely sad pain. It was also a sudden sense of clear clarity, a cold and sharp clarity like solid ice. "All right, Elias," I said softly but also quite firmly. "I completely understand everything now." I then sadly turned and deliberately walked back towards my clearly hidden table. Every deliberate step was now a slow and painful farewell. Every single step then deliberately moved me slowly away, not just physically but also deeply emotionally, from the son that I had lovingly raised, or from the son that I sincerely thought I had actually raised. I quietly sat back down and just watched sadly. The lavish party inevitably continued. The live music endlessly played on. People happily danced in circles. They all excitedly ate a delicious 5-tiered wedding cake, beautifully decorated with delicate sugar flowers. They proudly toasted with very expensive champagne that cost $300 a bottle. And they all happily took posed photos under the perfectly positioned bright lights. And I was effectively invisible. 2 more long hours slowly passed by. No one even remotely approached me to simply talk and catch up. No family member of Tiffany's, no close friend of Elias's, and not even the numerous waiters seemingly paid much attention to me beyond simply collecting my quietly stacked empty plates. Then, something finally happened that would unfortunately change absolutely everything. Genevieve suddenly stood up abruptly from her nearby table. She was currently wearing a shimmering emerald-colored dress absolutely covered in eye-catching rhinestones, a genuine and undeniably expensive diamond necklace around her wrinkled neck, and a clear expression of obvious alarm plastered across her visibly stressed face. She then walked quickly towards Tiffany and urgently whispered something dire in her delicate ear. Tiffany then visibly paled. They both then began frantically searching for something undeniably important. Within just a few fleeting minutes, Genevieve quickly went up onto the elevated stage and grabbed the easily accessible microphone. The loud music abruptly stopped, and all of the many guests immediately turned their inquisitive gazes directly towards her. "Please excuse this unwanted interruption," she said formally, her voice obviously trembling, but also still audible to absolutely everyone. "I have to unfortunately inform you all that a very unfortunate and regrettable incident has just recently occurred. My undeniably valuable emerald necklace, a cherished family heirloom valued at a staggering $80,000, has suddenly disappeared. I distinctly left it safely in the bridal suite during the heartwarming ceremony, and now it is sadly completely gone." A low murmur then immediately rippled rapidly throughout the entire ballroom. People began to quickly look around nervously at each other with a clear mixture of both suspicion and curiosity. Genevieve then continued calmly. "I completely understand that this situation is undeniably uncomfortable, but I sincerely need absolutely everyone to fully cooperate with our active investigation. The diligent security staff will discreetly check all of the common areas as soon as possible. And if absolutely anyone possibly saw anything suspicious, then please report it immediately to the trained staff." My suddenly beating heart then started beating noticeably faster, not necessarily because I actually knew anything at all about the missing necklace, but more so because I immediately recognized that cold and calculating look in Genevieve's beady eyes, that unmistakable look that was clearly searching urgently for a convenient scapegoat. And when her accusatory eyes then finally landed directly on me, I unfortunately knew exactly what was predictably coming next. She boldly walked slowly down from the elevated stage, and then steadily headed directly for my clearly isolated table. Tiffany and 3 of her closest friends closely followed menacingly behind her. Behind them came a clearly confused Elias, looking noticeably flustered. And closely following behind absolutely everyone, feeling undeniably curious and also audibly murmuring amongst themselves, were at least 50 other formally dressed guests, all eagerly approaching to personally witness the undeniably shocking spectacle. "Naomi," Genevieve said sweetly, her tone friendly, but her calculating eyes like solid steel. "I just sadly need to urgently ask you a few simple questions right now." "Of course," I replied calmly. "Ask me whatever you need. I'm an open book." She slowly smiled. But it certainly wasn't a kind or genuine smile. It was clearly the cold and calculating smile of a seasoned predator, who had already eagerly chosen its utterly helpless prey. "Were you in the bridal suite at any point earlier this afternoon?" It definitely wasn't a simple question. It was clearly an accusation expertly disguised as a casual inquiry. "No, I wasn't physically present in the bridal suite. I've honestly been sitting right here quietly at my assigned table practically all night long." One of Tiffany's close friends, a particularly tall woman with long platinum blonde hair, then stepped boldly forward. "I distinctly saw her earlier," she said accusatorily, while also clearly pointing directly at me with her perfectly manicured finger. "I distinctly saw her near the main restrooms just about 2 hours ago. And she was also walking away rather quickly." "Yes, I willingly admit that I definitely went to the nearby restroom earlier," I honestly replied, also sadly feeling the carefully constructed trap suddenly closing tightly around me like any completely normal person predictably would. "But that absolutely doesn't mean that I ever actually entered the bridal suite, though." Genevieve then took just one more deliberate step closer to me. She was standing so extremely near now that I could easily smell her obviously expensive perfume, a truly extravagant fragrance that undoubtedly cost significantly more than my actual monthly rent. "Naomi, I completely understand that your personal financial situation is undoubtedly complicated. I also know that you've undoubtedly worked incredibly hard your entire long life. I definitely know that things sadly haven't always been easy for you. And I also fully understand that being suddenly surrounded by such glaring luxury and wealth can sadly be quite tempting for some." The blood then immediately rushed painfully to my hot head. She was openly implying that I had coldly stolen the valuable necklace right in front of absolutely everyone, and also right in front of my own precious son. "I most certainly did not touch your undeniably valuable necklace, Genevieve. And I honestly didn't even know that you had even left it somewhere unguarded, to begin with." Tiffany then also stepped deliberately forward to stand slightly beside her increasingly angry mother. Her cold eyes, which had been icy ever since the very first moment that I had nervously met her, now sadly burned with something undeniably worse than mere coldness. They actually burned with a blatant sense of utter contempt. "Let's all just be completely honest here, Naomi. You have sadly been noticeably uncomfortable all night long, quietly hidden away at this clearly isolated table. You clearly don't belong in this kind of undeniably exclusive environment. Maybe you simply saw an obvious opportunity and brazenly took it. Maybe you simply thought that no one would honestly notice your absence." Even more invited wedding guests then suddenly approached to silently witness the undoubtedly shocking spectacle that was now fully unfolding before their very eyes. We were now officially the unintended center of considerable attention. 300 increasingly judgmental pairs of critical eyes now completely fixed intently on the obviously poor woman, who was currently being openly accused of shamelessly stealing right at her very own precious son's lavish wedding. I suddenly searched desperately for Elias's elusive gaze. He was silently standing awkwardly just behind Tiffany, his face now incredibly pale, and his large fists tightly clenched firmly at his rigid sides. I anxiously waited. I desperately waited for him to bravely say something, to confidently defend my obvious honor, and to simply tell absolutely everyone present that his own loving mother would honestly never brazenly steal anything from anyone. But Elias merely remained sadly silent. "Mom," he finally said reluctantly, his weak voice audibly trembling, "just willingly let them quickly check your small purse. If you honestly have nothing at all to hide, then there's really no big problem here, right?" Those deeply cutting words sliced through me sharply like a series of jagged knives. My very own precious son sadly doubted me. My very own precious son sadly and firmly believed that I was honestly capable of such a shocking criminal act. You can honestly check whatever you possibly want, I then bravely said, my voice admittedly trembling with a barely contained sense of burning anger. You won't honestly find anything at all because I definitely didn't take anything. Genevieve boldly extended her waiting hand. Just give me your small purse. I then slowly handed her my small, unassuming and basic-colored clutch. She proceeded to unceremoniously open it roughly right in front of absolutely everyone, quickly emptying all of its small contents dramatically onto the nearby table. My clearly worn wallet with a meager $30 in crumpled cash, a soft handkerchief, a cheap tube of lipstick, the simple keys to my own humble apartment, and an old and faded photograph of a smiling Elias from when he was just 5 years old. Absolutely nothing else whatsoever. Genevieve then visibly frowned, clearly disappointed not to have actually found any condemning evidence. She then completely emptied my small purse, carefully checking every single hidden compartment with increasingly eager fingers. Nothing suspicious. Absolutely nothing at all. I honestly should have felt a genuine sense of complete relief. But what I sadly felt was actually something far deeper and more disheartening. I genuinely felt the utter humiliation of suddenly being publicly searched like a common criminal right in front of 300 invited wedding guests. I sadly felt the crushing weight of every single judgmental gaze silently leveled directly at me. And I sadly felt the deep betrayal of my own devoted son, who sadly hadn't lifted even a single finger to bravely stop any of this terrible madness. Maybe you conveniently hid it somewhere else entirely, Tiffany then said in an undeniably poisonous voice. Maybe you brazenly left it somewhere else in the nearby restroom, or also out in your aging car, or maybe you even purposely gave it secretly to someone else entirely to intentionally take discreetly out of the entire wedding venue. This entire situation is now completely ridiculous, I bravely replied, also sadly feeling hot tears now threatening to well up in my increasingly angry eyes. But I bravely held them firmly back. I absolutely wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry openly in utter humiliation. I honestly didn't do anything at all wrong, and I also now demand that you all immediately stop openly accusing me without any credible evidence whatsoever. Without any credible evidence whatsoever, Genevieve sneeringly repeated with a loud and bitter laugh. The obvious evidence here is that you are honestly the only person even present here tonight who would actually have a credible motive to steal the priceless necklace. The only desperate person here who is currently and desperately needing quick money. The tightly packed circle of critical wedding guests slowly surrounding us had now gradually expanded even wider. We were now clearly the obvious main show of the long and extravagant night. I could definitely hear all of the hushed murmurs, the rampant speculation, and the quick judgments. A woman wearing a lavish lavender hat whispered something loudly to her stern husband that unfortunately ended with the single word shameful. An older man then shook his graying head sadly while also looking pitifully at me with a noticeable mixture of both pity and disdain. Elias, please, I then sadly said, while directly turning to address my own reluctant son. Tell them that you honestly know me, and simply tell them that I would honestly never purposely do anything like this. He completely avoided my increasingly desperate gaze, his guilty eyes deliberately fixed on the hard floor as if he could somehow magically find the perfect words there that he honestly dared not publicly speak. Mom, I honestly don't even know what to even think right now. The valuable necklace has unfortunately disappeared. Someone certainly took it, and you? He sadly stopped short, but the painful damage was already undeniably done. My very own precious son honestly doubted me. After 35 long years of consistent sacrifice, of countless sleepless nights, of constantly working tirelessly until my own hands actually bled, and of honestly giving him absolutely everything that I had and also everything that I actually was, he still stubbornly doubted me. And what exactly? I bravely confronted Elias, while also taking a slow step deliberately towards him. Just finish the damning sentence, Elias. I'm undeniably. I must be a thief. Is that what you honestly think of me? Is that what you've let them all believe about me? He finally locked eyes with me, and what I saw in them just completely devastated me. It was shame. Not shame for doubting me, but shame of me. Shame that I was his mother. Shame that all those important, fancy guests knew he came from a woman who spent her days cleaning floors. I'm not calling you a thief, Mom, but you have to admit the way things look, it's pretty bad. The necklace just vanished and you were right there. If you just cooperate with the search. A search? I practically exploded. My purse was searched right in front of everyone like I was some kind of criminal. What else do you want me to do, Elias? You want me to strip right here in front of your rich friends to prove I'm not hiding anything? The silence that followed was just deafening. Everyone was staring at me, their faces showing everything from utter shock to complete disgust. Genevieve, of course, seized the moment. If you've got nothing to hide, she said, then you won't mind if we call the police. They can do a more thorough search, check your car, your clothes, maybe even your house. My house. The thought of these people invading the only space that was truly mine just filled me with a rage I didn't even know I was capable of feeling. You're not checking anything, I said, my voice way louder than I meant it to be. I am not a thief, and I am not going to let you treat me like one just because I don't have the same money as you people. Tiffany let out this cruel, mean laugh. Ah, so it's all about the money. You're finally admitting it. You're resentful. Resentful because Elias married someone with a better standing. Resentful because you're not the center of his universe anymore. Her words stung like whips, but there was this twisted truth buried in them that made it hurt even more. It wasn't that I was resentful about the money itself. I was just completely heartbroken that my son had chosen this fake, shallow world over the genuine love I'd always given him. It has nothing to do with money, I replied, trying my best to keep it together. It has to do with respect, with dignity, with remembering where you came from, and who helped you get here. Elias took a step toward me, man. His face was bright red, his hands were shaking, and in his eyes I saw something I had never seen before. It was pure rage. Rage directed right at me. Enough, Mom. You're ruining my wedding. You're making a scene in front of all our guests. Can't you just cooperate and let this whole thing be resolved quietly? Ruining your wedding? I repeated, feeling like every word was a nail being hammered into my heart. I'm ruining your wedding. Not the woman who accused me of being a thief without any proof. Not the people who have treated me like trash since I walked in here. I'm the problem. Yes, Elias shouted, finally losing all control. Yes, you're the problem. You've always been the problem. Always embarrassing me with your poverty, with your cheap clothes, with the way you talk, with your very existence. The whole ballroom just went completely silent. Even the background music had stopped playing. It was like 300 people were holding their breath, all witnesses to a son destroying his own mother with words that could never ever be taken back. I never asked you to make all those sacrifices, Elias continued, his voice cracking but full of this bitter venom. I never asked you to work cleaning houses. I never asked you to live like we were poor. You did it because you wanted to, because you enjoyed playing the martyr, the poor suffering single mom. And now you want me to carry that guilt around forever. Every word was like a knife twisting in me, but the worst was still yet to come. I wished 1,000 times that my father hadn't left us. Not because I needed him, but because then maybe you would have had someone else to cling to, someone else to suffocate with your pathetic love. The tears finally just burst out of my eyes. I couldn't hold them back anymore. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of realization, of finally seeing with total clarity who my son really was deep down. Elias, I whispered. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, he replied. I'm saying I'm tired of you. Tired of your expectations. Tired of your constant need for validation. Tired of feeling like I owe you something just because you decided to be a single mother. Tiffany put her hand on his shoulder, like she was encouraging him to keep going. Genevieve was smiling, but just barely. They were loving this. They were enjoying seeing me fall apart. And if you want to know the truth, Elias continued, moving even closer, if you really did take that necklace, honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised because you've always been like this. Always taking my time, taking my energy, taking my whole life to fill the emptiness of yours. I raised my hand then, not to hit him, just to stop him, just to make the words stop. But Elias saw it completely differently. What are you going to do? He yelled. Are you going to hit me? Are you going to show everyone here what kind of person you really are? And then he did something I can never ever forget. Something that changed everything forever. Elias raised his own hand and slapped me. A dry, loud slap that made my head just snap to the side. The sound echoed in the absolute silence of the ballroom. Someone screamed. A woman let out this choked gasp. A man muttered something under his breath, like he just couldn't believe what he'd seen. But I didn't even feel the physical pain. I felt something so much worse than that. I felt the last little thread that connected us just snap completely. I stood there paralyzed, my cheek burning and the metallic taste of blood in my mouth where my teeth had cut the inside of my lip. The silence in the ballroom was suffocating. 300 guests had just witnessed a son strike his own mother at his own wedding. And nobody said a thing. Nobody moved to defend me. Nobody even tried to intervene. Elias took a step back, staring at his own hand like he couldn't even believe what he had just done. His face was pale. His lips were trembling. But he didn't apologize. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He just looked at me with this mix of horror and resentment, like I was the one to blame for provoking his violence. Tiffany broke the silence first. She rushed over to Elias and hugged him like he was the victim who needed comforting. "It's okay, honey," she whispered, but loud enough for me to hear. "She provoked you. Everyone saw it. She was attacking you." A lie. I had done nothing but raise my hand in a gesture to make him stop, but the truth just didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the story they were building right there. I was the poor, troubled mother. He was the successful son who had finally defended himself. Genevieve approached then, placing herself between Elias and me like a protective shield. "I think it's best if you leave, Naomi," she said, her voice cold and controlled. "You've clearly had too much to drink, or you're just too upset. We don't want any more unpleasant scenes. For everyone's sake, especially Elias's, you should just go now." Had too much to drink. They hadn't even offered me a glass of wine. But that would be the story they told later. The drunken, violent mother who ruined her son's wedding, and had to be kicked out after attacking him. I touched my swollen cheek and looked at my son one last time. I searched his eyes for any trace of the child who used to hug me, the teenager who promised to take care of me when he grew up, the young man who called me his hero. But that child just didn't exist anymore. Maybe he had never truly existed to begin with. Maybe he had always just been a projection of my own hopes and sacrifices. "You're right, Genevieve," I finally said, my voice strangely calm. "I'm leaving, but not because I'm drunk or upset. I'm leaving because I just understood something very important." I looked Elias right in the eye. I just understood that I wasted 35 years of my life raising a stranger. Someone who values appearances more than love, money more than loyalty, and the acceptance of superficial people more than the sacrifice of the person who gave him life. "Mom," Elias started, but I raised my hand to silence him. "No, you don't have the right to call me that anymore. A mother is someone who matters, someone whose love is valued, someone who is defended when unjustly attacked. You just proved that I am none of those things to you." I bent down and picked up the things Genevieve had dumped out of my purse. The photograph of little Elias had fallen on the floor. I picked it up, looked at it one last time and placed it on the table. "Keep it," I told him. "It's the only memory I want to leave here. The image of a child who no longer exists." I turned around and started walking toward the exit. Every single step was both liberation and agony at the same time. I could feel everyone's eyes following me. I heard the murmur starting to rise like a chorus of judgment, but I just kept walking with my head held high, refusing to run, refusing to show any more weakness. When I reached the exit, I heard Tiffany's voice behind me, loud and clear so everyone could hear. Well, that was dramatic. Poor Elias. Some kids just aren't lucky with the families they're stuck with. There was laughter. Nervous, uncomfortable laughter, but laughter nonetheless. And that was the very last thing I heard before stepping out of that nightmare of a garden. I walked down the dark street without any destination in mind. I hadn't called a cab. I hadn't made any plans for how to get home. I just needed to get away. Away from those people. Away from that sun I just didn't recognize anymore. Away from the life I had built based on lies I had convinced myself were true. I walked for 2 hours under the streetlights. My feet were just killing me in those low-heeled shoes I had polished so carefully. My cheek was throbbing where Elias had hit me, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. A pain so profound it felt like I was drowning in it. I finally reached a bus stop and sat down on the plastic bench. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. There were no buses running, but I didn't even care. I just needed to sit down. I just needed to breathe. I took out my wallet and counted the cash I had. $30. But in my bank accounts, the accounts Elias never even knew existed, I had almost $2 million just sitting there waiting for me. Properties in my name, investments that a financial advisor had been managing secretly for decades. For 35 long years, I had lived as if I was poor to try and teach my son values. But that lesson had failed spectacularly. He hadn't learned humility. He had learned contempt. He hadn't learned gratitude. He had learned shame. Now it was time to finally live for myself. To be who I really was deep down. To stop hiding behind the facade of poverty I had built with the best intentions but the absolute worst results. When the sun started to come up, I walked to an ATM. I withdrew the maximum allowed $500. Then I walked to a modest but clean hotel. I rented a room for 1 week. I took a long hot shower, letting the water wash away not just the grime, but also the remnants of my previous life. I looked at myself in the mirror. My cheek was purple and swollen. I was going to have an ugly bruise for weeks. But when I really looked into my eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. I saw determination. I saw strength. I saw a woman who had just broken free from chains she had put on herself. For the next few days, I didn't even leave that hotel room. I ordered food for delivery. I kept the curtains closed. I let my phone die and didn't even bother to charge it. I just needed that silence. I needed that empty space where I could think without the crushing weight of 35 years of sacrifice pressing down on my chest. On the 3rd day, I finally sat down at the computer in the business center. The time had come to face the reality of who I really was. Not the self-sacrificing mother who cleaned floors. Not the humble woman who hid behind second-hand clothes, but Naomi, the heiress to a considerable fortune, owner of properties in 3 different states, and a woman who had actively chosen invisibility when she could have easily chosen power. I logged into my bank accounts for the first time in months. The balance just took my breath away. The properties my mother had left me had just skyrocketed in value. The conservative investments that a financial advisor had been handling on my behalf for years had grown silently, steadily. I had been a millionaire this whole time, while pretending to count pennies for the bus fare. And my son never even knew it, never appreciated it, never valued the real sacrifice I had made in hiding this truth to teach him humility. I called the financial advisor, an older man named Charles, who had worked with my mother and respected my wish to keep the accounts private all these years. "Mrs. Thacker," he said, surprised when he finally recognized my voice. "It's been years since our last conversation. I was starting to think you had forgotten we even existed." "No, Charles, I was just living another life. But that life is over now. I need your help to start a new one." "Of course. How can I be of assistance?" "I want to sell one of the properties, the smallest one. I need immediate access to the money, and I also want you to research investment opportunities, something related to luxury events, exclusive event planning, that kind of industry." There was a pause. "Pardon my curiosity, but that's quite a radical change from your previous style. Are you certain?" "Completely sure. I also need you to help me change my documentation, my legal name. I want to use my full maiden name, Naomi Maeve Thacker. I want any search for Naomi Thacker alone to yield no immediate results. You can do that with the right contacts and the correct legal procedures. Yes, it will take a few months, but it is possible. May I ask why? Because the woman who was Naomi Thacker died 3 days ago at a wedding, and I don't want anyone from that life to find me easily. Charles didn't ask any further questions. He was a discreet professional. That was precisely why my mother had trusted him in the first place. The property sold in just 2 weeks. I received $50,000 clear. With that money, I moved to another city, not too far away, but far enough to make a fresh start. I rented a modern condo in an elegant building. I bought new clothes, nothing flashy but high quality. Classic cuts in neutral colors that just whispered subtle wealth. I cut my hair into a modern style that took years off my appearance. I got facial treatments. I hired a personal trainer. Not because I wanted to look different for other people, but because I wanted to look different for myself. I wanted to look in the mirror and not see the woman who had allowed herself to be humiliated at a wedding. I wanted to see someone new, someone stronger. During the first 6 months, Elias tried desperately to contact me. He called my former jobs, went to my old apartment, talked to all the neighbors, but I had vanished like smoke. I had paid the full remaining month's rent and left without providing a forwarding address. My belongings, all those cheap possessions I had accumulated over the years, I donated to a charity organization. I took nothing with me from the past. Nothing except the most painful lesson of my life. 1 year after the wedding, Charles contacted me with an opportunity. A luxury event planning company was looking for investors. The owner wanted to expand his business but needed capital. Sterling Vance was his name. A man in his 50s with years of experience organizing events for millionaires, but without the resources to take his business to the next level. We met at an upscale cafe. He arrived with a portfolio full of photographs of events he had organized. Weddings at private vineyards, charity dinners at museums, corporate parties on yachts. Everything was beautiful, exclusive. Exactly the kind of world Tiffany and Genevieve lived in. Mrs. Thacker, Sterling began. Charles spoke very highly of you. He says you're interested in the luxury events business. Very much so, I replied calmly, sipping my coffee. But not just as a silent investor. I want to be actively involved. I want to learn the business from the inside out. He raised an eyebrow in surprise. Most investors just want to see monthly reports and dividends. You want to actually get your hands dirty? Exactly. I have the time. I have the resources. And I have very personal reasons for wanting to understand this world from the inside. I didn't give him any specific details. I didn't tell him about Elias, about the slap, about the humiliation that remained buried deep in my past. But Sterling was a smart man. He saw something in my eyes that told him I wasn't just any ordinary investor. I was someone with a mission. I invested $500,000 in his company. In return, I received a 40% stake and an active role in decision-making. Over the next 2 years, I worked closely alongside Sterling, learning every single aspect of the business. How to negotiate with luxury vendors, how to deal with demanding millionaire clients, how to create experiences that people would remember for a lifetime. But more importantly, I learned the names, the families, the social circles, the small exclusive world of high society. I memorized who moved in which circles, which families organized which events, which last names opened which doors. And yes, I meticulously researched Tiffany's family, Genevieve, and their entire social circle. I discovered that Genevieve Vance was a member of 3 exclusive clubs, and organized an annual charity gala to raise funds for a children's hospital. I found out that her husband had lost a considerable amount of money in bad investments 2 years earlier, even though they continued to maintain the appearances of wealth. I learned that Tiffany worked as a public relations specialist for luxury companies, but earned significantly less than her extravagant lifestyle suggested. I also discovered something about Elias that broke my heart in a different way. He had lost his job just 6 months after the wedding. The company he worked for had shut down its operations. And with his modest resume and no real connections in Tiffany's world, he hadn't been able to find anything even remotely equivalent. He was now working in positions far below his level of education and experience. Security guard at events, occasional private driver, jobs that paid the bills, but completely crushed his ego. Tiffany, according to my sources, was becoming increasingly distant and cold. Fights were frequent. She constantly chastised him for not having the same economic standing as her family. She criticized him for not being able to maintain the extravagant lifestyle she expected. She essentially chastised him for not being rich enough to deserve her love. Ironic, wasn't it? Elias had given up a millionaire mother for a wife who despised him for not having money. But I felt absolutely no satisfaction from that information. I only felt a strange emptiness inside. A part of me, the maternal part that never fully dies, wanted to call him, wanted to tell him that I could help him, that he still had a mother who would love him unconditionally. But the other part, the part that remembered the slap, the accusations, the humiliation in front of 300 people, that part held me firm in my silence. The years passed like the turning pages of a book. I had finally started writing my own story. 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. Each one transformed me a little bit more. Sterling's company, which was now my company too, grew to become one of the most prestigious in luxury event organization. Our name, Vance Events, was synonymous with elegance, exclusivity, and absolute perfection. We handled weddings where the minimum budget was $200,000, corporate dinners for Fortune 500 companies, charity galas where each table cost $50,000. I had gone from being the invisible woman at a wedding to being the woman who decided who was important enough to be invited to the city's most exclusive events. The irony was certainly not lost on me. Over time, my participation in the company grew even larger. Sterling, now in his late 50s, began talking about retirement. He offered to sell me his share of the company. We negotiated for months and finally reached an agreement. I would become the majority owner with a 75% stake. He would retain 25% and work as a consultant, but the real control would be all mine. I invested additional capital in the transaction and the expansion of the business. We opened a second office on the West Coast. We hired the best event planners in the entire country. We formed strategic alliances with 5-star hotels, exclusive vineyards, and historic mansions available only for private events. I, the woman who had cleaned floors for years, now decided who could access the most coveted spaces in the world of luxury. But I never lost sight of my true objective. I never forgot why I had entered this world to begin with. Every event I organized, every new client I attended to, every connection I made, was one step closer to the moment I knew would eventually come. The moment when my past and my present would inevitably collide. That moment finally arrived in the 8th year. I received a call from a potential client. A woman named Vivian Baker, director of a foundation for children with chronic illnesses, was organizing an exclusive charity gala. Only 200 guests, the wealthiest, most influential, most powerful people in the city. The goal was to raise $5 million in a single night. I need the best, Vivian said during our first meeting. This event has to be absolutely impeccable. The guests are people who have seen everything, attended everything. I need to surprise them. I need them to open their wallets generously. What is your budget for the organization of the event? I asked, taking notes on my tablet. $100,000 for the event production itself. But that doesn't include the cost of the venue. I'm still looking for the perfect location. I smiled. I think I have exactly the place you're looking for. A historic mansion on the hill, with spectacular gardens, and a panoramic view of the entire city. It has only hosted 3 events in the last 5 years because the owners are extremely selective, but I have an excellent relationship with them. I can secure the space for you. Vivian leaned forward, clearly interested. And how much would that cost? $4,000 just for the rental of the night, but trust me, it's worth every single penny. Your guests will have never been there before. It will be truly exclusive. She didn't hesitate for even a second. Done. You have the contract, Mrs. Thacker. Over the following weeks, I immersed myself in every single detail of the gala. The theme would be timeless elegance. Decor in champagne, gold, and pearl white tones, centerpieces with imported orchids, a 7-course dinner prepared by a 2 Michelin star chef, live music provided by a symphony orchestra, and a state-of-the-art lighting system that would transform the gardens into a dreamscape. I also carefully reviewed the guest list. Vivian had sent it to me so I could coordinate the personalized invitations. When I opened the Excel file and started reading the names, my heart just stopped beating. Row 42, Genevieve Vance. There she was, the woman who had accused me of being a thief, the woman who had orchestrated my humiliation, on the guest list for the year's most exclusive event, an event that I was now organizing. I took a deep breath. After 8 long years, the universe was finally giving me exactly what I had been waiting for, without even realizing it. An opportunity not for revenge, because revenge was far too vulgar and I was no longer that woman, but an opportunity to show that woman who the person what she had despised had truly been revealed. I continued reading the list of attendees. Tiffany's name wasn't there, nor was Elias's. Only Genevieve and her husband. It made perfect sense. They were the ones with the genuine high society connections. Tiffany and Elias, according to what I knew, didn't even run in those circles anymore. Their marriage had gone downhill so dramatically that they barely even showed up at family gatherings together. The day of the gala finally arrived after 8 solid weeks of obsessive planning and getting ready. Everything had to be absolutely flawless. Not necessarily to impress Genevieve, although that was a small perk, but because my professional reputation was on the line and depended on perfection in every single event I put on. I arrived at the mansion a full 6 hours before the first guest was supposed to arrive. My team, all 20 of them, were already hard at work. The florists were carefully positioning the orchids. Lighting technicians were running all sorts of tests to get it just right. Waiters were practicing their synchronized serving techniques. The chef was personally overseeing every single detail in the temporary kitchen that we had set up just for the event. I was wearing a floor-length champagne-colored gown. It was an elegant cut, and it had set me back a cool $8,000. My hair was pulled back into a sophisticated bun. I had on the diamond earrings that I had bought myself the previous year as a treat. Designer shoes, a delicate Swiss watch on my wrist. I looked every bit the successful, powerful, elegant woman that I had become. There was absolutely nothing left of the Naomi who used to wear second-hand clothes. Right at 6 p.m. the guests began to show up. Luxury cars lined the entrance to the estate. Drivers hopped out and opened doors for their passengers. Men in tuxedos and women in haute couture gowns glided down the carpet that we had laid out from the parking area all the way to the main entrance. I stood right at the door with Vivian, personally greeting each and every guest as they arrived. It was part of my job as the main organizer. I wanted to make sure that every little detail of their experience was absolutely perfect from the very second they set foot on the property. And then I saw her. Genevieve Vance emerged from a black Mercedes. She was wearing a perfectly appropriate emerald-colored dress that was covered in rhinestones. Her hair, which was now grayer than I remembered, was styled in perfect waves. She was wearing that same diamond necklace that I remembered from the wedding so many years ago. Her husband, now a completely gray-haired man, was accompanying her, wearing a bored expression on his face. She walked toward the entrance with that air of confidence that only old money can buy. Her eyes were taking everything in, evaluating the decor, the lighting, the other guests, looking for any little flaw, any reason to find fault and criticize. When she stood in front of me, her eyes passed right over my face without even a flicker of recognition. Of course, she didn't recognize me. 8 years had passed. I was a completely different version of myself, and she probably hadn't given me a second thought since that night. I had been so insignificant in her world that my face had completely faded from her memory. "Good evening," I said with a professional smile. "Welcome. I'm Naomi Thacker, the principal event organizer." I held out my hand. She shook it briefly with that same weak grasp that I remembered from years ago. "The venue is lovely," she said in a judgmental tone. "Vivian spoke highly of your services." "I'm pleased to hear that. I hope the evening exceeds your expectations." She just nodded and moved on without giving me another glance. Her husband hadn't even bothered to say a word. I stayed in my place, smiling and greeting the next guest, behaving with the utmost professionalism that I had cultivated over the years. But something inside me had shifted. Seeing her standing there, not recognizing me, not even remembering the pain that she had caused me, filled me with a chilling clarity. This woman had been so cruel to me because in her mind I wasn't a real person. I was just an object, a nuisance, something so insignificant that I didn't even deserve to be remembered. And now, 8 years later, I was in complete control of her experience tonight. I was deciding what she would eat, where she would sit, how she would be treated. I had all the power in the world, but I wasn't going to use it to humiliate her. I wasn't going to sink that low. Instead, I was going to give her the most perfect night of her life, and when it was all over, she would know exactly who had made that perfection possible. The gala went off with the precision of a Swiss watch. Every course of the dinner was served at the exact perfect moment. The orchestra played pieces that made conversations flow effortlessly and naturally. The lighting in the gardens created a magical atmosphere that even made the most cynical millionaires pull out their phones to take pictures. The speeches were moving, but thankfully not too long. The auctions for exclusive items generated bids that were higher and higher. I oversaw everything from the shadows, moving behind the scenes like an invisible conductor leading an orchestra. I communicated with my team through a small earpiece. I solved problems before they even had a chance to become crises. When a guest spilled red wine on the tablecloth, we had a replacement at their table in under 3 minutes. When the microphone started making a strange noise during a speech, our sound technician replaced it within seconds. Everything flowed as if it were pure magic, but it was really just hard work. Years of experience translated into a silent excellence. I observed Genevieve throughout the evening. She was seated at one of the best tables, which was near the stage, but not so close that it would be uncomfortable. She chatted animatedly with the other women in her social circle. She laughed with that crystal-clear laugh that I remembered so well. She also participated in the auctions, bidding $20,000 for a weekend at a private Caribbean resort. Her husband seemed more interested in his phone than in the evening's events, but that really wasn't my problem. Toward the end of the night, after the announcement that they had raised $6,200,000, exceeding their original goal by more than $1 million, Vivian took the stage to give the final speech. "I want to thank everyone here for your extraordinary generosity," she began in an emotional voice. "Thanks to you, hundreds of children will be able to receive the treatment they need. But tonight would not have been possible without one person in particular. A woman whose vision, dedication, and perfectionism have transformed this gala into something truly unforgettable. Naomi, please come up to the stage." My heart started to beat a little faster. I hadn't been expecting public recognition. I usually preferred to stay in the background out of the spotlight. "Naomi, please come up to the stage," Vivian continued. I really didn't have a choice at this point. All the guests had turned to look for me. I walked toward the stage with a professional smile. I climbed the steps and stood next to Vivian. The 200 guests applauded. The stage lights shone on me, illuminating me completely. I was the center of attention for all those powerful people, including Genevieve. "Naomi is not only an exceptional event organizer," Vivian said. "She is a visionary." When I told her about this gala, she immediately understood the importance of the cause. In fact, in addition to her impeccable work, Naomi has made a personal donation of $100,000 to our foundation. More applause. Some of the guests even stood up to clap. It was true. I had made that donation the previous week, but not for the publicity. I had done it because I finally had the resources to help others, and those sick children certainly weren't to blame for my personal problems. From the stage, I could see Genevieve very clearly. Her face showed surprise. She was starting to study me more intently. There was something in her eyes, a spark of recognition that hadn't quite fully formed yet. I was just an elegant stranger to her, but there was something about my face, about my gestures that felt vaguely familiar. "Thank you, Vivian," I said, taking the microphone. "It has been an honor to work on this event. Seeing so much generosity gathered in one place reminds me that while money can divide people, it can also unite them when used for the right purpose. I hope everyone remembers this night, not only for the elegance of the event, but for the lives you helped save." I stepped down from the stage to a round of applause. Several guests approached me to congratulate me, give me their business cards, ask me about future events, and treat me with the respect that they only gave to someone they considered an equal. And then Genevieve approached. "Mrs. Thacker," she said, her smile now seeming a little less confident. "The event has been extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. Thank you, Genevieve. I'm glad you enjoyed it." She looked at me more intently now. Her eyes scanned my face, searching for something. "Forgive my boldness, but your face looks incredibly familiar. Have we met before? Perhaps at another event?" "Perhaps," I replied in a neutral tone. "I attend many events in my line of work." "No, it's not that," she insisted, frowning slightly. Something more personal. Your voice too. There's something." She paused, and I saw the exact moment when the memory started to return. Her eyes widened slightly. Her mouth dropped open a little. The color began to drain from her face. You are," she began to say, her voice trembling slightly. "Naomi Marie Thacker," I completed for her. "Luxury event organizer, businesswoman, philanthropist. And yes, Genevieve, I am also the woman you accused of stealing your emerald necklace 8 years ago at your daughter's wedding. The woman you humiliated in front of 300 guests. The mother whom her own son struck while you watched with satisfaction. The silence between us was so thick that it could have been cut with a knife." She took a step back as if my words were physical blows. "My God," she whispered. "It can't be. You were poor." "Yes. Or so you thought. Because I looked poor, dressed poor, acted poor. But it turns out that appearances can be deceiving, Genevieve. It turns out that the woman you despised for wearing second-hand clothes was actually a millionaire. It turns out that the mother you accused of stealing had more money in the bank than you and your entire family combined." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her husband approached, noticing her expression of shock. "What's wrong, dear?" he asked with concern. "Nothing that concerns you," Genevieve replied without taking her eyes off me. "Leave us alone." He obeyed, confused but compliant. Genevieve and I stood there. 2 women separated by 8 years, and an abyss of decisions and consequences. "I didn't know," she finally said, her voice weak. "If I had known you had money." "There it is," I interrupted, my voice cold. "If I had known you had money." Those are exactly the words that confirm everything I thought about you that night. Your respect isn't based on a person's character. It's based on the size of their bank account. She swallowed hard. "It wasn't personal. Of course it was personal. It was deeply personal. You treated me like trash because you assumed I was poor. You allowed your daughter to hide me at a table next to the kitchen. You accused me of stealing without any proof. And then you watched my son strike me and said nothing. Worse still, you were glad because to you I wasn't a person. I was just a problem that was finally resolving itself." Tears began to form in Genevieve's eyes, but they weren't tears of genuine remorse. They were tears of shame, of being discovered, of having to face the social consequences of having mistreated someone who turned out to be important. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "If I could go back in time." "But you can't. No one can. And you know what the saddest thing of all is, Genevieve? That your apology isn't even for treating me badly. Your apology is for making the mistake of treating someone with money badly. If I had truly been as poor as you thought, you would still believe that you had acted correctly." She couldn't deny it because we both knew that it was the truth. "Where is the necklace?" I asked then. "The famous emerald necklace. You found it, didn't you?" Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "It was in my car. I had left it there before the ceremony and completely forgot about it. I found it 2 days after the wedding." "So, for 8 years you have known that you accused an innocent woman, that you allowed her son to strike her for a crime she never committed, and you never tried to apologize. You never tried to make things right." She lowered her gaze. "I didn't know how to find you. You disappeared. A lie. You could have found me if you had truly wanted to, but you didn't because you didn't care. I was nobody to you, just collateral damage in your perfect world. What are you going to do now?" she asked, her voice fearful. "Are you going to ruin my reputation? Are you going to tell everyone what I did? I looked at her for a long moment. I saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of losing her social standing, her reputation, her place in that superficial world that she valued so much. And in that moment I had all the power. I could destroy her with a single conversation. I could tell Vivian, tell the other guests. I could make the story of the woman who falsely accused someone of theft spread throughout all the social circles she frequented. But I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to do anything, Genevieve, I finally said. I'm not going to ruin your reputation. I'm not going to seek revenge because doing that would turn me into someone like you. And I've worked too hard over these 8 years to become someone better. She looked at me with surprise and confusion. Then why did you tell me all this? Why reveal yourself now? Because I needed you to know. I needed you to see with your own eyes that the woman you despised, the woman you humiliated, the woman you treated like trash was someone valuable. Not because she has money, but because she always was. The money only changed how you see me. Didn't change who I am. Genevieve remained silent. Tears ran freely down her face, now ruining her carefully applied makeup. Your son, she finally said, her voice trembling. Elias, does he know you're alive? Does he know where you are? No, and I don't want you to tell him. But he has been looking for you. Tiffany left him 4 years ago. He lost everything, his job, his marriage, his pride. He works in temporary jobs. The last time I saw him a few months ago, he was working as a security guard at events. He asked me if I knew anything about you. He was desperate. Hearing that should have moved me. I should have felt that maternal pang of wanting to rescue my son from his suffering. But what I felt was something more complex. I felt pity, yes, but I also felt the firmness of knowing that some decisions have permanent consequences. Elias made his choice that night, I said, my voice even. He chose the world that Tiffany and you represented. He chose appearances over real love. He chose to strike his mother instead of defending her. And now he lives with the consequences of that choice. I cannot save him from that. I shouldn't even try. But you're his mother, Genevieve insisted. He was confused. He was young. He made a terrible mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was a revelation. It showed me who he really was. And it also freed me. Freed me from living a lie. From sacrificing myself for someone who didn't value that sacrifice. For 35 years I lived for him. Now I live for myself. And I'm finally happy. Genevieve looked at me with an expression that I couldn't fully decipher. There was admiration mixed with envy, sadness mixed with regret. I wish I could be like you, she said softly. I wish I had the courage to live on my own terms. It's never too late to start, I replied. But it requires more than just courage. It requires being willing to let go of the things you thought defined you, status, appearances, the approval of others. I only achieved it because all of that was violently taken from me. You still have the option to let go by choice. She nodded slowly, as if considering my words for the first time in her life. I'm going to go now, I told her. I have to supervise the final details of the event. But before I leave, I need you to understand something very clearly. If you tell Elias that you saw me, if you give him any clue about where to find me, you will never hire my services again. And I will ensure that no other luxury event company in this city works with you either. I have those connections now. I have that power. It wasn't an empty threat. It was simply the truth, and she knew it. I won't say anything, she promised. You have my word. Your word isn't worth much to me, Genevieve, but I will trust your instinct for self-preservation. Enjoy the rest of the evening. I walked away from her and returned to work. I had final details to supervise, guests to bid farewell to with elegance, a team to coordinate for the teardown that would begin in 2 hours. My personal life could wait, but my professionalism never could. The gala ended at midnight. The last guests left satisfied, full of good food, good wine, and the satisfaction of having contributed to a noble cause. Vivian hugged me with tears of gratitude in her eyes. She promised to recommend me to all her contacts. She told me that it had been the best gala that they had ever organized. When everyone had finally left, I stayed alone in the illuminated gardens. My team was efficiently dismantling everything. I just needed a moment, A moment to process everything that had happened. 8 years. It had taken 8 years to reach this moment, 8 years of rebuilding myself from scratch, of learning to value myself instead of seeking validation in others, of building a small but respectable empire, of becoming someone who mattered not for being someone's mother, but for simply being me. And now, after facing Genevieve, after closing that circle, I felt strangely empty. Not satisfied as I had imagined, just empty. Because the truth was that revenge, even the revenge of success, doesn't fill the void left by betrayed love. Mrs. Thacker, one of my coordinators, called to me. There's someone at the entrance who insists on speaking with you. He says it's personal. My heart stopped. Genevieve had spoken. She had broken her promise within hours. Elias was here. Tell him that I'm not available, I replied automatically. I already did. But he says that he won't leave until he speaks with you. He says that he recognized you during the event. He's one of the security guards that we hired for the parking lot. There it was, the moment that I had been avoiding for 8 years, the moment that part of me had been waiting for and part of me had been dreading in equal measure. Tell him to wait in the rose garden, I said. I'll be there in 5 minutes. I needed those 5 minutes to prepare myself, to remember who I was now, to fortify the walls that I had built around my heart. Because I knew that when I saw Elias, when I looked into those eyes that had once been my entire reason for existence, something inside me would want to yield, would want to forgive, would want to be a mother again. But I couldn't. I shouldn't. I walked toward the rose garden with slow, deliberate steps. The moon illuminated the path. I could see his silhouette waiting for me. He was no longer the arrogant young man in the expensive tuxedo who had gotten married 8 years ago. He was a 37-year-old man with slumped shoulders, dressed in the gray uniform of a security guard. His face was marked by years of regret and struggle. When I stood in front of him, we looked at each other in silence. His eyes were red. He had been crying. Mom, he said, his voice broken. I've been looking for you for 8 years. I am not your mom, I replied in a cold voice that I didn't even recognize as my own. That woman died at your wedding. You hit her until she was gone. He flinched as if my words were physical blows. I'm sorry, God, I'm so sorry. Not a single day goes by that I don't regret it, that I don't hate myself for what I did. Your regret is yours, Elias. It is not my place to alleviate it. I just need you to know the truth, he said desperately. Tiffany manipulated me. Her mother pressured me. I was scared of losing everything. I was confused. I was an idiot. But I loved you. I always loved you. I laughed then, a bitter laugh that sounded cruel even to my own ears. You loved me, but not enough to defend me. Not enough to believe in me. Not enough to choose me when I needed you most. You were right, he said, letting his shoulders drop completely. You were right about everything. I valued the wrong things. I chased a world that never truly wanted me. Tiffany left me as soon as I stopped being useful. Her family discarded me like trash. And I lost the only person who loved me unconditionally. Not unconditionally, I corrected him. I had conditions. I expected respect. I expected loyalty. I expected love. And you didn't fulfill any of them. Let me make it up to you, he pleaded, taking a step toward me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving to you that I've changed, that I've learned, that I finally understand what I lost. I looked at him for a long moment. I saw the child that I had raised, the teenager that I had protected, the young man that I had loved with every fiber of my being. But I also saw the man who had betrayed me in the most painful way possible. No, Elias, I finally said. I am not going to give you that chance because I know what would happen. I would forgive you. I would take you back into my life. And eventually, when you no longer needed me, when you found something better, you would hurt me again. Because that's what people do. They hurt the ones who love them the most because they know they will always be there. I won't. You would do it, maybe not intentionally, but you would. And I have worked too hard to rebuild myself to break myself for you again. Tears ran down his face. Please, Mom. You're the only thing I have left. I've lost everything else. And that, I replied, is exactly the wrong reason to seek me out. You seek me out because you ran out of options, not because you value me, but because you need me. And I am no longer available to be needed, only to be valued. Mom, please, he started to beg. Goodbye, Elias, I said, turning away. Live your life. Learn from your mistakes. Become a better man. But do it without me because I've fulfilled my part. I've given you everything I had to give. Now it's my turn to live for myself. I walked away from him. I heard his sobs behind me. I heard him call my name over and over, but I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I kept walking forward toward the life that I had built without him, toward the woman that I had become on my own. And even though my heart broke with every step, I knew that I was doing the right thing. Some wounds are too deep to heal. Some bridges are too burned to rebuild. And some people, no matter how much you love them, need to stay in the past so that you can keep moving toward the future. That night I came back to my chic condo. I slipped off the $8,000 dress. I washed all the makeup off my face. I gazed at my reflection and saw a 63-year-old woman who had, at long last, discovered who she really was. She wasn't the picture-perfect mother she had always envisioned herself to be. She didn't have the idyllic, happy family she had always dreamed of creating. But she possessed something even more precious. She had dignity, pure and simple. She had self-respect, earned through years of experience. She had a life that was truly her own, shaped by her choices and her experiences. And in the end, that was finally enough for her, more than enough. Did you enjoy my story? And what city are you listening from? Let's connect in the comments section below. If you appreciate the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can continue to share stories like this one. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful support. It truly means the world to me. I'm really looking forward to reading your comments on the story. On the screen you'll see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend checking out. There's a whole lot more content available on my channel for you to explore. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I'll see you in the next life story. With love and respect always,